Whew, okay, here we go. I am remembering, is this on? Yeah. I'm remembering that, this isn't the official beginning, but I remember that when Columbine happened, I was invited to speak at a church group. It was a multi-church group, a lot of teenagers were there, and had no idea what I was going to say. Well, I had a sketch, but you know, when you're in the moment, you just don't know. And just following God's heart. So I took some time to pray and worship to find that, to be reconnected to that thread. So I'm trusting that. So today, terrible news that we heard today. There's another school shooting. We have to use another word. We have to use the word another. And I wanted to give context to that because I think it's important. So, you know, it's an election year, so there's going to be a lot of conversation of, is it gun control? Is it this or that? And a lot of these subjects trigger us, and we find ourselves on opposite ends of the spectrum with a vehemence towards the other, with so much hatred and anger. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for all these things. Every emotion you're having in your body, there's a reason for it. And so these are some things that help orient me, and hopefully this can be orienting to you. So one thing that helped me process things like school shootings is how these things are connected to a sexual trauma. And I have said this before, I believe our nation is going through a sexual trauma, and many of the issues that we confront that have us on opposite ends is connected to that root sexual trauma, that root nerve. And I'd like to share how this connects it to that nerve for me. So one of the things I learned is from one of my colleagues, Dr. Mark Schoen. I hope I pronounced his last name correctly. He's in his late 80s or early 90s, actually. He's in sex education, public education. And he's one of my peers that I've gotten to know and laughed with and cried with. And he shared with me an experience that I think is really relevant today. He told me how he was invited to speak. I think that's what was going on. He was at an event in Sweden, and but he was staying at a host family and was watching television with them. And at that time, it was like the family hour of television. And they were watching these shows for kids, and for the commercials in Sweden, there was a lot of sexuality and nudity there. And he noticed how, as the parents were watching this with the kids, he looked at the parents, wondering if they're going to cover their eyes or anything, and they didn't do a thing. They didn't flinch because sexuality is normalized there. And then the program came back on, which I think was, it featured guns, a lot of killing. And when those scenes came on, he noticed how the parents would cover the kids' eyes. And he thought that was profound, because being an American, it's kind of the opposite. It's, if sexuality is featured, we're quick to cover the eyes of our kids. But if violence is shown, and guns and all this is shown, you know, we don't react as big. It's like we've become unsensitized to those things. And why is that? What does that mean? I think this is indicative of a really clear sexual wound that's unique to America. It's other nations have a sexual wounding of their own, of course, but as an American, I'm speaking from this position. And I believe, as someone who's created content, that it's involved with media. It's involved with the movies and the stories that we put out there and that we sensationalize. And when this stuff is repeated on the news, that's also media. And we get influenced by media. So the second piece I want to offer to you there to explain why comes from another one of my mentors, Dr. Christina Kincaid. She's an anthropologist, and she shared with me her dissertation. and she's a primatologist, meaning that she's studying chimpanzees. And what she observed is that in this zoo, which was, I think, the top place to go to study primates in the country at the time, she observed how a mother chimp, when they have a baby, that the zookeepers would pick up the baby and they would show the mom how to hold the baby. And then when the mom knows how to hold the baby, then the mom does it. And she observed that when zoologists don't do this, that a mom chimp would have a baby and just leave it there. And I always thought that maternal instinct was like encoded, like it's, something that a mom would instinctually do. But apparently it's, at least with this study, it wasn't the case. When chimps, mother chimps, in captivity have babies, they have to be shown that they have to pick up and care for the baby. And of course, in nature, when chimps are around other chimps, they get this modeling from each other, right? So the point here is that we learn by these distinctions. If we don't have the distinction shown to us, we're not going to do it. And then when it's shown to us, we do it. So healthy distinctions must be taught, as well as unhealthy distinctions must be taught. And this is where this connects to media. Because if you observe America's media, and the games and everything, that gun violence is shown pretty, it's just shown. It just is, and sexuality is something that is shamed, which is really ironic, right? Because sexuality, what happens with sexuality? You create life. It's life-giving. It gives you energy in your body. Now, I'm not talking about the dark version of sexuality when it's used for rape and when it's used to erase a culture, which it has been done before. But sexuality in nature creates life. And this is the distinction between sexuality and guns, because guns, they can protect and preserve life, yes, but they don't create life. And it's really interesting how the subject of what creates life is shamed a lot more than a subject which doesn't create life. It preserves life, right? Like, oh, let's protect. I understand that part. But it doesn't create life. So that was the second distinction that it taught me. And so how effective is this? How effective is media and its conditioning? How deep does this go? Well, I'll share how deep it went for me. Because there was another shooting that happened early on in the pandemic, which was also in Georgia. And this happened in March 2020. There was a shooting at a Korean spa, and I believe 8 Asian women died. And the shooter happened to be a Christian who just exited an evangelical counseling. It was rehabilitation, but it was teaching it through the evangelical lens. And I've also been an evangelical, so I understand that completely. But there is a languaging sometimes when we have, life is Christ and sin equals death. This separation of concepts can sometimes validate one to kill the sinner, and that's validated because it kills the sin. Now, the more mature Christian knows the difference between the sin and sinner. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of maturity out there. And sometimes, we may not go as far as killing something we disagree with or someone we disagree with, but we kill them in our hearts. We ostracize them. And to me, that shooting was really profound, because this was the first time I heard Asian hate, anti-Asian sentiments. And then, and as someone who grew up in Arkansas, around a whole lot of white people, I don't remember experiencing racism. Maybe because it was my age, but to my knowledge, I was pretty innocent. I wasn't exposed to a lot of it. And I attended an evangelical Baptist church, and we were one church. I didn't experience it in that church. But the older I got, and coming back here, there have been times where I felt it, and I thought that was really peculiar. And I think this is a big tangent. Let me go back to where I was coming from. So what made the shooting at the Korean spa really profound for me is that I found myself associating with the shooter. You know, I empathized with him, like, oh wow, you know, I can kind of understand that, because, you know, sexuality can be, you know, we're taught that it's shameful and we have to distance ourselves from our temptation. And so, you know, I can see how someone can go down that road. And I thought it was really profound that I empathized with the shooter and not with my Asian sisters. And I thought to myself, why is that? What happened there? This is conditioning, at least for me. This is conditioning, at least for me. And it wasn't until I went to the Philippines, just last year, I'm going to share a lot of information here. It wasn't until I went to the Philippines just this past year that when I saw myself seeing Filipinos on the billboards, on the movies, in the commercials, on the candy bars, it wasn't until then that I found myself attracted to Filipino women. It just never, before then they were all like family, and to be attracted to another Filipino seemed kind of incestuous. But for the first time, that's what happened. And that was really profound for me. Like, wow, why did it happen to me this late in life? I think it's because of the conditioning. And if some of you guys have been following me, I've been exploring with some erotic films. And what I see in my erotic films is like, wow, my first 3 erotic short films, none of them were featuring Asian women. They're mainly featuring white women or mixed race. And so far, I've shot a lot more, but just knowing my own output and tracking my own reflections of my conditioning in my art is like, wow, that's interesting. So that's where I'm seeing my conditioning. I'm also seeing my conditioning on how I emotionally reacted to the shooting of March 2020. And I also feel a conditioning when I respond to things like this, like the shooting today. So those how those pieces connect for me. Let me look at my phone here for this other note. As you can see, I can tend to stray. Yeah, so I'm already at the end. So I guess like the point of this all, in me sharing this, is that I want us to feel oriented. Because as someone who's worked in media, I know what it's like to produce a show. I've been a part of the decision making that happens, if not from our immediate executives, then the executives above them, and then the executives above them, and then the executives above them. All that to say is that someone is making a choice to choose what we put on the screens. Someone's making a choice to tell us what news is. Someone's making a choice when mainstream music is pumped out there and we hear the content of the lyrics and everything. There is a level of control that's happening. There is a level of thoughtful conditioning that permeates all the way down to us. And when we experience any issue that has us react really big, and then all of a sudden we're in 2 opposite sides, and like, oh, I think this way, and then suddenly there's like a lot of anger and dissension and hatred between the 2 parties, especially now during election year. When this stuff happens, this stuff is happening intentionally. So just be aware that there is a level of intentional conditioning that's wanting us to react really big from unfortunate current events like this, to react in a way where we are on opposite sides versus where we truly are, which is at a common heartbreak for humanity. Don't you feel that common heartbreak for humanity? We don't hear that a lot on the news, do we? No. That's why it's really important for each of us to share this to one another. Let's be the news. that's not the news, and share our common heartache when tragedy happens. And to see the other human in the person in front of us, even though they may believe different things, they're hurting too. And in this common hurt, we are one, we are humanity. We are one humanity in God's image. And we can hurt together during tragedies like this. So the last thing I want to share, which wasn't on the list, but I think is important. My father modeled something really amazing to me. And he's evangelical Christian, traditional marriage, and I also believe in the power of traditional marriage. But he married a gay couple, and he lost half his Bible study for it. But he knew it was the right thing to do. And I was so proud of my father for doing that, because he was teaching me how to love across the lines, right? To love across the lines. When we experience a line and we're suddenly divided on any issue, this line is there to love through. Love is not kept on only one side or the other. That's not love. That's just kind of like, I don't know, a practice of self-acceptance or something. The real exercise of love happens when we love across the lines. And yeah, sometimes we do need to be loved on one side or the other to be nourished and become strong. And then when your love is strong, you are supposed to love across the lines. That's where love exists most loudly. Loud love lines. Maybe I can make something out of that. Or maybe you can make something out of that. But so that's how it works. I hope these words give a sense of orientation, that there is a level of conditioning that's happening through the media. And if you feel triggered at a visceral level, it's because there is a national sexual wound that we're recovering from. That national sexual wound, by the way, it's from colonization. It's when sexuality was used in the name of God to take over through any means possible, killing, murdering, marrying, through any means possible, to take over something in the name of God. That's the trauma indoctrination encoded in our Christian theology, right? And as Christians, to love as Christ is to love across the lines. To love across the lines. So let's just be oriented as we continue to move into this ache. And I'm going to take a moment to pray myself. This moment of silence is also for you to say your prayers or your meditations, and just to be present with the emotion of the nation, and to be one with one another, to feel that heartache and humanity with one another again. Because, again, during times of election, the media is not going to feed us that healthy, good stuff. It's going to keep us triggered and reacting really big. So let's just let the media be the media, which is essentially a form of trauma. Let's let the media be the media. I'm just going to rise above it, beyond that noise. And let's just hurt with one another and embody love for one another. Okay, here we go. thank you for this moment of being present together. And help us remember how immediate this can be at an instant. Amen, and so it is. Thank you for joining me with this prayer, this national prayer. And this is why I do the erotic art. I do the erotic art because I think inside the trauma of eroticism, there are answers for us to heal on all the other fronts, because I think they're deeply, deeply connected. So if you are in support of this message of love, please share, or just share this moment with someone else, with your own stories, and or check out the work that I'm doing at holyerotica.org. That's just where I try to create a space that we can have conversations about our sexual traumas to get into those deep, hard to reach spots that heals all the other things. Okay, so again, I encourage you guys to cultivate this in your own lives, but if it's hard and you don't have a place, then you're welcome here.